You wake up in 1917. At first, you think it's some kind of weird camping trip, but then you notice the faint hum of early century life. No car horns blaring, no phone buzzing, no distant EDM bass line. Just the occasional clip-clop of horse hooves on cobblestone and the cough of some guy who hasn't discovered antibiotics yet. The air smells like wet wool, stale tobacco, and the peculiar musk of, we still think bathing once a week is fine. You're in a small Midwestern town, where the tallest building is the church steeple and nightlife means sitting on your porch talking about corn prices. There's a train station, a general store, and a barbershop where the guy doubles as a dentist because, sure, why not? You're still shaking off sleep when you stumble into the kitchen. No coffee machine, obviously. Coffee's made in a percolator that looks like it could double as a small cannon. You sip it anyway because caffeine is the closest thing you have to motivation. Normally, mornings are quiet. Maybe you'd read the paper, gripe about the price of sugar, and carry on pretending the massive, bloody war across the ocean is none of your business. But today, the newspaper slaps you in the face with headlines that practically scream in all caps. German submarines sink American ship. Americans dead. Your eyes scan the details. A merchant ship minding its own business blown apart by a German U-boat. And as if that's not enough to ruin your toast, there's this other little tidbit. A decoded telegram from Germany to Mexico. The Germans are basically saying, hey, Mexico, if you join our side and keep the U.S. busy, we'll help you get back Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. You read it twice because it sounds like the plot of a bad soap opera. Germany, a country halfway across the world trying to trade your states like Pokemon cards. And Texas? Really? Imagine telling Texans in 1917 that they're about to be Mexican again. That conversation would have gone over about as well as telling a cat you turning the vacuum on. You picture the chaos, saloons going silent, cowboys slowly reaching for their rifles, and somebody shouting, not on my watch. Until now, America's been playing the cool, aloof bystander at Europe's insane party. France, Britain, and Russia are on one side, Germany and Austria-Hungary on the other, and everyone's been throwing punches since 1914. The U.S. is that guy in the corner saying, this isn't my drama, while sipping his drink. But the Lusitania sinking in 1915 already made people twitchy. Now, with American ships going down and Germany plotting with Mexico, it's like the last straw's been yanked out of Uncle Sam's drink. As you keep reading, you realize it's not just a distant political squabble anymore, it's personal. Americans are dying in cold, gray waters thousands of miles from home. Politicians are calling for action. Newspapers are whipping up outrage. And there's this growing sense that if the U.S. doesn't step in now, it's going to regret it later. That whole safe oceans thing, out the window. That whole mind-your-own-business policy, being crumpled up and tossed in the wastebasket. You glance out the window. Kids are playing with hoops and sticks, the 1917 version of an iPad, completely unaware their future might involve muddy trenches instead of grassy baseball fields. Somewhere, men in suits are debating the cost of war. Somewhere else, mothers are wondering if their sons will be called up. It's all brewing under the surface like bad coffee. Part of you still thinks, hey, maybe we can just send a strongly worded letter to Germany and call it a day. But that's not how this is shaping up. President Woodrow Wilson, who literally campaigned on the slogan, "He kept us out of war" just months ago, is about to do a 180. Congress is getting ready to vote on whether to officially declare war. You know how in movies they're asked that one moment when the music changes, and you realize the hero is about to make a choice that changes everything? Yeah, you're in that moment, except the hero is an entire nation. And the choice is between staying safe or wading into one of the bloodiest conflicts in human history. The whole scene feels surreal. You think about how, up until now, the U.S. has been selling weapons, food and supplies to the Allies, kind of like a bartender who says he is neutral but keeps refilling one side as drinks. You think about how war has already eaten up millions of young men in Europe, chewing through them with machine guns, artillery, and gas that burns your lungs until you suffocate. And now, somehow, you're supposed to picture yourself in the middle of all that. The town buzzes with talk. In the barbershop, men argue about whether the U.S. can actually make a difference, or if it's just going to send its boys into a meat grinder. In the churchyard, old Civil War veterans puff on pipes and mutter that they've seen this before. just with muskets instead of machine guns. And in kitchens across America, wives and mothers are staring at their sons a little differently, wondering how long before a letter arrives telling them to pack up and report for training. You hear a train whistle in the distance. Not unusual. But it suddenly sounds more ominous. That's the same whistle that'll send troop trains rumbling east toward the ports, packed with young men who've never been more than 2 towns from home. And maybe, just maybe, you'll be one of them. Somewhere in Washington, officials are already drawing up plans, making speeches about honor, duty, and defending freedom. It all sounds noble until you remember that defending freedom in 1917 means swapping your porch swing for a trench, your Sunday dinner for hardtack, and your clean sheets for lice-infested blankets. But that's later. Right now, you're standing in your kitchen, coffee cooling in your hands, staring at a newspaper that basically says, "Congratulations, America. You're going to war." You don't know yet that the coming months will smell like gunpowder, sound like screaming shells, and taste like mud in your teeth. You don't know that friends you haven't met yet will die in places you can pronounce. You don't know that the moment you finish this coffee might be the last truly peaceful morning you'll have for years. And you also don't know, not yet, that history will look back on this exact moment and say, "This is when America stepped onto the world stage for real." But you're about to find out. Smash that like button before things get trench-level messy. So you enlist. Or you get drafted. Doesn't matter. Either way, you're suddenly the proud owner of a free haircut, a uniform that smells like it's been stored in a barn since the Spanish-American War, and a job title that's basically human mud ornament. You don't even get time to overthink it. One day you're at home drinking bad coffee, the next you are on a train full of nervous young men trying to act like they were not terrified. Training camp is your new reality. Picture an overcrowded mix of barracks that smell like wet socks and damp hay, a mess hall where the food somehow manages to be both overcooked and undercooked, and a parade ground where you all march until you feel like your knees are trying to file a workers' comp claim. The schedule is brutal. Wake up at 5 a.m. to the sound of a bugle blasting in your ear. Stumble out of bed into the cold morning air, boots half-laced because you overslept by 30 seconds. Line up for roll call while an officer with a mustache that could take flight in strong winds shouts your name like he has personally offended you exist. Breakfast, if you can call it that. The coffee tastes like boiled dirt, the eggs are watery enough to be considered soup, and the bread could double as an emergency building material. Eat fast, because you've got a date with a mile-long march carrying a rifle that weighs more than your little brother. Then it's straight into drills, marching in formation until your spine feels like it's been replaced with a broomstick, practicing salutes until your arm wants to detach itself, and getting screamed at for not holding your bayonet like you mean it. Speaking of bayonets, you'll spend an alarming amount of time stabbing sandbags. The theory is that stabbing a sandbag over and over will prepare you for stabbing an actual enemy. The reality is that you just feel like a lunatic in the middle of a field pretending the dirt sack in front of you personally insulted your mother. Somewhere in the distance, other recruits are practicing digging trenches, basically digging a ditch you will probably live in later while developing a deep and lifelong hatred for mud. The uniform doesn't help. It's made of heavy wool, which is great if you're planning to be cold, sweaty, and itchy all at the same time. Your boots are brand new, stiff enough to carve blisters into your heels, and somehow let in water no matter how dry the day is. The helmet they hand you is basically a shallow metal bowl with a strap. It might deflect a bullet, but it's just as likely to collect rainwater directly onto your scalp. You quickly learn that personal hygiene is optional here, not because you want it to be, but because showers are rare, soap is a luxury, and your new best friends are the lice that live in your clothing. Everyone stinks, so nobody complains. Much. But there's also the latrine situation, which is just a polite way of saying hole in the ground with a plank to sit on if you're lucky. Privacy? Forget it. If you've ever wanted to make intense eye contact with a fellow human while doing your business, the Army is here for you. Drill instructors are a whole other ordeal. These guys could probably make a teddy bear cry. They've got one job: break you down until you more obedient than a well-trained dog. And they do it with the efficiency of a wrecking ball. Too slow getting to formation? You're running laps. Rifle not polished to a blinding shine? You're running laps. Breathing too loud? Guess what? Laps. And if you thought they'd limit their insults to your soldiering skills, think again. Your haircut, your posture, your parents, your hometown, all fair game. When you're not drilling, you're learning other skills, like how to pitch a tent in the rain, how to assemble and disassemble your rifle faster than a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat, and how to survive on rations that make prison food look gourmet. They give you hardtack, which is basically a cracker designed by someone who hates joy, and canned meat that tastes suspiciously like metal. There's also the gas mask training. This involves running around with a big rubber-faced contraption strapped to your head, trying to breathe while your lungs scream for fresh air. The instructors toss fake gas into the air, and if you don't get that mask on in time, you'll be coughing like a 2-pack-a-day smoker. They tell you it's good practice for the front lines. You start to wonder if maybe it's just a fun little power trip for them. And just when you think you've mastered the misery, they throw in night drills. Imagine standing in a dark, freezing field, barely able to see the guy next to you, while being ordered to crawl through mud under barbed wire. They fire blanks overhead to simulate battle conditions, but you still flinch every time the shots ring out. Your breath fogs in the air, your fingers go numb, and you start thinking maybe the guy who invented war should have been sat down for a long talk instead. Sleep becomes a precious commodity. You get maybe 6 hours if you're lucky, and that's assuming nobody snores, nobody yells fire as a prank, and you don't wake up to find your bunkmate's boots mysteriously missing, which somehow becomes your problem. The mattress is a thin layer of straw stuffed into a sack, and you lie there listening to the rustling of mice, wondering which one is going to crawl over your face first. Days blur together. March, drill, eat, clean your rifle, march some more, stab a sandbag, clean your rifle again. Maybe write a letter home if your hands aren't too numb. Your world shrinks to the barracks, the mess hall, and the parade ground. The only thing keeping you going is the half-hope that maybe, just maybe, the war will end before you actually have to fight in it. But deep down, you know, that's not how this story works. You didn't get dragged out here to play soldier in the mud for fun. The instructors are getting you ready for something much bigger, much uglier, and much more dangerous than anything you've seen so far. And while you're standing there, rifle in hand, sweat freezing on your back, you can almost feel history nudging you toward the edge. You're not just learning to march in straight lines, you're learning to survive in chaos. And sooner than you think, the chaos won't be pretend anymore. The Army isn't just about mud, drills, and shouting. It's also about the cast of characters you're stuck with day in and day out, whether you like them or not. You don't get to pick your squad. They hand you a bunk, and whoever's in the ones next to you is basically your new family. It's a family you didn't choose, can't escape, and will probably have to share lice with. First up, there's Private Cornbread Johnson from Alabama. Cornbread talks about home like it's a sacred temple. Every meal somehow turns into a monologue about his mama's biscuits, or how grits just done a taste right up here. You were pretty sure if you gave him a choice between ending the war tomorrow or getting one more helping of his mama's fried chicken, he'd pick the chicken. He's got that slow southern drawl that makes everything sound like a folk tale, even when he's just complaining about the latrines. Then there's Frankie, the wise guy, Marino from New York. Frankie's mouth runs faster than his legs, which is saying something because the man can sprint like he's being chased by rent collectors. He cracks jokes at the worst possible times, during roll call, during rifle inspections, during bayonet practice, and somehow never gets caught. You figure it's because he has this innocent smile that makes officers think, well, maybe he's not a complete disaster. But you know better. Frankie asks the guy who can smuggle an extra slice of pie from the mess hall without anyone noticing, and you're not entirely sure how he does it. Corporal Death Stare Harris is in charge of your section. Harris has a face carved out of stone and eyes that could freeze boiling water. He's not actually that old, maybe late 20s, but the way he carries himself makes you feel like he's been at war since the beginning of time. He doesn't yell often, but when he does, it's like being hit by a brick. Harris believes in discipline, precision, and the power of fear. The rumor is that he fought on the Mexican border before this, but nobody's brave enough to ask. And then there's Sergeant Papa Bear Delaney, who somehow manages to be terrifying and comforting at the same time. He's the kind of guy who will tear into you for having your boots unlaced, but also hand you a cigarette afterward and tell you a story about when he screwed up even worse. Delaney's been in since before you were shaving, and it shows. He's missing the tip of his left ear, and when someone asked what happened, he just said, "Bar fight," and walked away. Your days are spent with these people. You eat together, you march together, you sweat together, and occasionally you get in trouble together. There's no avoiding them. The barracks smell like a mix of damp wool, unwashed bodies, and whatever cornbread smuggled in his footlocker. You learn who snores, who talks in their sleep, and who can't wake up without being physically dragged out of bed. Every so often you meet soldiers from other companies. Some are from big cities and walk around like they've seen it all. Others are farm boys who've never been more than 10 miles from home. The mix is chaotic. City guys teach country guys new slang. Country guys teach city guys how to gut a fish. Everybody swaps stories about home, girlfriends, jobs, that one time they almost died doing something stupid. And even though half of it's probably made up, it doesn't matter. Stories are the currency here. They keep your brain from locking up under the monotony. The only outsiders you see regularly are the officers who float in and out, delivering orders or inspecting uniforms. They're like minor gods, appearing suddenly, making arbitrary decisions, and vanishing again. You never know if they're going to hand out praise or punishment, so you treat them all with the same mix of fake respect and quiet resentment. Of course, there are also the people you're supposed to fight, the Germans. You haven't seen them yet, not in person, but you hear about them constantly. The officers talk about the Hun, like they are some kind of mythical beast that eats babies for breakfast. You hear stories about how they fight dirty, use gas without warning, and dig trenches so well you could live in them for years. Whether it's all true or just propaganda, you can't tell. But the way everyone talks, you'd think they're 10 feet tall and bulletproof. And then there are the French. Some have been assigned to help train you for trench warfare. These guys have been in the thick of it since 1914, and it shows in their eyes. They wear faded uniforms, carry themselves like ghosts, and have that tired, bitter humor of people who've seen way too much. They show you how to keep your rifle dry in the mud, how to tell the difference between incoming and outgoing artillery, and how to swear in French when your rations freeze solid. You can tell they think Americans are late to the party, not ungrateful for the help, just skeptical. Like, "We'll see if you last the winter, rookie." Within your squad, personalities clash. Cornbread and Frankie argue about everything: baseball, music, the best way to fry chicken. Frankie teases Harris when he's out of earshot. Harris pretends he doesn't hear, but probably does. Papa Bear tries to keep the peace, but sometimes the tension boils over. Fights break out, usually just shoving and shouting, but sometimes a fist flies. Nobody holds grudges for long, though. You can tee when you know you might be depending on that same guy to drag you out of a shell hole someday. And then there's you. You don't say much, at least not at first. You watch, you listen, you learn how people tick. You figure out who will trade their dessert for your cigarette rations, who's good in a fight, and who's going to crumble the first time things get ugly. You find your place in the machine because that's what an army is, a giant grinding machine made of human parts. At night, you all end up in the same dim barracks, lying in your bunks while the sound of distant bugles drifts in. Somebody might start telling a story, somebody else hums a song, and Frankie inevitably cracks a joke that makes Cornbread threaten to throw his boot at him. You're bone-tired, but you listen, because this is the only time the army feels less like a job and more like, well, not quite home, but something close. These are the people you'll go to war with. The ones who'll see you at your best, your worst, and your stupidest. The ones who will make you laugh when you least expect it and cover your back when everything goes to hell. You didn't choose them, but in this world, they're all you've got. Night falls like a heavy blanket, the kind that doesn't keep you warm, just presses down on you until breathing feels like work. The air cools fast, that bone-deep chill that creeps through your uniform and settles somewhere between your ribs. The sun's gone, and with it, the thin illusion that you're safe. Daytime is noisy, chaotic, predictable in its own strange way. But nighttime? That is when the world goes quiet in the wrong kind of way, the kind that makes you hear every rustle, every creak, every breath. You're in the trenches now. Damp walls of packed earth rise higher than your head, and the ground under your boots is a permanent swamp. The smell is a cocktail of wet soil, unwashed bodies, and something faintly metallic. Blood, maybe, though you try not to think about it. Somewhere nearby, a soldier coughs, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the stillness. You've been told to keep low, keep still, and for the love of all that's holy, keep quiet. Any flicker of light could get you noticed. Any sound could invite the wrong kind of attention. So you sit there, rifle in hand, trying to make yourself part of the dirt. You shift your weight, and your boot sinks deeper into the mud with a wet squelch. You freeze, half expecting someone to shush you, but the only response is the distant drip of water down the trench walls. Then there's movement. Not enemy soldiers, at least you hope not, but something alive. A rat the size of a loaf of bread scurries past your leg, bold as anything. It pauses, stares at you with beady little eyes like it's daring you to make a move. You know better. You've heard the stories about rats in the trenches. They eat anything. They multiply faster than you can kill them. And sometimes they get into the rations. You make a mental note to check your pack in the morning. The danger doesn't just come from the enemy. It's in the air itself. You've been told to keep your gas mask close at all times. Gas attacks don't announce themselves politely. One moment you're breathing cold night air, the next you re-choking on an invisible cloud that burns your throat and peels the skin from your lungs. The veterans say the first whiff smells like sweet hay or fresh flowers, but you don't want to find out. You've practiced getting the mask on in seconds, but in the dark, with shaking hands, seconds feel like hours. Your ears strain for sounds beyond the trench. Sometimes you catch faint voices speaking German, drifting across no man's land. Sometimes it's just wind in the wire. Other times there's the soft whistle of incoming shells, a sound you learn to recognize instantly. If you hear the whistle, you drop. If you hear nothing, it's already too late. Tonight, there's nothing yet. But the silence feels loaded, like the world's holding its breath. The darkness plays tricks on you. Shapes shift in the shadows. Every shadow could be a helmeted head, every rustle a bayonet being unsheathed. Your fingers cramp from gripping your rifle too hard. You tell yourself it's fine, that it's just another quiet night, but your heart doesn't listen. Then, a flare goes up. It's sudden, blinding, bathing everything in harsh white light. You drop instinctively, pressing yourself into the mud as the light floats slowly down, swinging like a pendulum. For a few seconds, you see everything. The jagged silhouette of barbed wire, the churned earth of no man's land, and the slumped shapes that aren't moving. When the flare fizzles out, the darkness slams back in, heavier than before. Not long after, there's a noise, faint at first, then growing. Footsteps? No. The uneven clink of metal, the soft thud of boots on wet ground. Your stomach tightens. You glance at the man next to you. He's already watching, eyes wide. Then, a distant pop, a single shot, and the stillness shatters. Shouts in German answering fire from your own side, the deep boom of artillery waking up the night like an angry god. You duck, your helmet ringing as dirt showers down from a near miss. The sound is overwhelming. Machine gun bursts tearing the air, the whine of ricochets, the low roar of shells tearing into the earth. The trench becomes chaos. Men shout orders, others curse, someone screams for a medic. You fire into the dark without really seeing a target, just sending lead toward the noise and praying it finds something before something finds you. In the middle of it all, you realize you've gone deaf in one ear from the blast of a shell that landed too close. The world becomes muffled, like you're underwater, but you keep moving, keep firing, because stopping isn't an option. Somewhere above, another flare bursts, revealing enemy shapes scrambling back the way they came. The gunfire slows, then stops, replaced by the groans of the wounded and the labored breathing of the living. The night settles again, but it's not the same. Now there's a smell of gunpowder and blood in the air, mingling with the ever-present stench of mud and rot. You can taste it, metallic and sour, clinging to the back of your throat. You wipe your face with a filthy sleeve, realizing too late that your hands are shaking. You try to steady them, but they just keep trembling. You check on the guy next to you. He's fine, rattled, but fine. Two men down the line aren't. Medics move in, heads low, muttering to each other in the dim light. They work fast, but you can tell from their faces who is going to make it and who isn't a T. You turn away, not because you're cold, but because you know staring won't help anyone. Sleep? Forget it. Your shift might end, but the adrenaline's not going anywhere. You sit there in the dark, rifle across your lap, eyes fixed on the black emptiness beyond the trench. Somewhere out there, the enemy is doing the same, watching, waiting, wondering when the next flare will go up, when the next shell will fall, when the next quiet night will turn into hell again. You start to understand something the veterans never said out loud. In the daylight, you fight battles. At night, you fight your own head. The thing about surviving all this is that you start to realize the war isn't just about trenches, bullets, or who controls which muddy patch of land. It's about the fact that one telegram, one ship sinking, one politician's speech can send millions of people into a machine that grinds them down until they're unrecognizable. And here you are, one of those millions, trying to make sense of it while pretending you still remember what normal life feels like. When you first came here, you thought this was about fighting the bad guys. Simple, clear, like one of those dime novel stories with a good ending. Now you know it's not that clean. You've seen men you'd follow anywhere get killed over a few yards of dirt. You've watched your side do things you thought only the enemy would. You've learned that sometimes orders make no sense, but you follow them anyway, because if you don't, somebody else pays the price. You think about home more than you admit. The smell of coffee in the morning, the sound of the train whistle in the distance, the lazy Sundays where the biggest concern was whether it might rain before you finished your chores. That life feels like it belongs to someone else now, someone softer, someone who didn't know the taste of blood and mud mixing in the back of their throat. But here's the thing. You also start to see the bigger picture. Back in 1917, America was like that guy at the party who swears he's not getting involved, leaning in the corner sipping punch. Then someone spills a drink on his shoes, insults his friend, and suddenly he's throwing punches in the middle of the dance floor. The war pulled America into a fight it didn't want. But once it was in, it went all in. Troops, supplies, industry, propaganda. You're part of that surge. The living proof that the U.S. decided it wasn't going to watch from the sidelines anymore. And the crazy part? You've seen what that decision can do. Fresh American troops, unbroken by years of trench life, hitting the front lines like a wave that actually pushes the Germans back. You hear talk of how the enemy is starting to crack, how the balance is shifting, how maybe this nightmare might actually end. And yeah, you've also heard that before, so you don't hold your breath. But for the first time, it feels like the end isn't just a fantasy. Still, you can't shake the numbers. Every gain costs lives. You remember every face you've lost. Cornbread, who swore he'd take you home to meet his mama. Frankie, who could make you laugh even when shells were falling. Harris, who never smiled but never backed down. They're all names on lists now, bodies in the mud. Memories you're scared will fade because everything else in this place fades. colors, smells, even your own reflection in the mirror. The war teaches you strange things about human nature. It shows you that people will adapt to anything, even hell, if you give them enough time. That courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the job while your hands are shaking. That sometimes the guy you couldn't withstand in training is the same guy who'll save your life. That laughter, even the inappropriate kind, can keep you sane when everything else is falling apart. And maybe that's why it matters. Why this whole mess, ugly as it is going to echo far beyond you and your little patch of trench. Because when this ends, America won't just go home, wipe its boots, and forget it happened. This is the moment the country learned it could throw its weight into the world's biggest fights and actually make a difference. It's also the moment it learned that making a difference usually means bleeding for it. You're not thinking about history books while you're here. You're thinking about making it to the next meal, the next letter from home, the next sunrise. But you have heard the rumors about how the politicians are already talking about the New World Order and America's role in shaping the peace. You don't know what that means for you. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. You just know you'll carry this with you long after the politicians forget your name. When you finally get the letter saying it's over, whenever that day comes, you picture yourself stepping off the train back home. Maybe the streets will be lined with flags, maybe people will cheer. Or maybe it'll just be a few handshakes and a thanks for your service before everyone goes back to their business. You wonder if you'll even know how to live without the constant edge of danger, without the sound of gunfire in the distance, without the smell of wet earth and cordite in your nose. You also wonder if you'll tell people the truth. Will you talk about the rats, the lice, the fear that sat in your gut like a stone every night? Will you tell them about the screaming, the way a man's eyes look when he realizes he's not getting home? Or will you stick to the stories that sound like adventure, that make people smile and nod without squirming in their chairs? Maybe you'll say both. Maybe you'll say nothing. Maybe you'll just live with it, because that's all you can do. The night before you leave, and in whatever future this war allows you, you'll look out over the quiet trench one last time. You'll think about how many people stood where you're standing and never left. You'll think about the strange family you built here, forged out of necessity and survival. You'll think about how none of you asked for this, but all of you did it anyway. And when you finally turn your back on it, you'll carry a truth that isn't T in any official report. Wars aren't just fought by nations. They're fought by people, tired, scared, flawed, stubborn people who keep moving forward even when the mud is up to their knees and the sky is falling around them. So when someone asks you years from now why it mattered, you might shrug, light a cigarette, and change the subject. Or maybe you'll look them in the eye and say, because we showed up. And then you'll leave them to figure out for themselves whether they'd have made it out alive.